Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So inshallah ta'ala today we're going to be doing the Sahabi Salman Al-Farsi. And Salman Al-Farsi is one of the most intriguing of the Sahaba. I think all of us have heard of his names. And because he's so intriguing, because he's so exotic, we actually have a lot of legends and a lot of stories about him that are, Allahu Alam, probably not true. And as usual, we have a lot of scattered information about the Sahaba in general, but especially about Salman Al-Farsi, we have even less information because obviously, where did he grow up? He grew up in Iran. He grew up in the land of Faris. And so, obviously, we have absolutely no information about him from any source other than what he himself told of his own life later on and what he narrated to the Sahaba. But one thing that really makes Salman so intriguing and really one of the most exotic of the Sahaba isn't just his background. After all, he's the only Persian Sahabi that we know of. And so really he is speaking fluent Farsi. His lineage, his demeanor and his looks, all of it is pure Persian. It's not just that he's Persian, but the flip that happened, the very, very ironic and profound change that happened, that he grew up in the pinnacle of Persian power, seeing the glory of what is called the Sassanid Empire. And he was a citizen and a member of the Sassanid Empire at a time when no one could ever have predicted that the empire would be destroyed and wiped out. And not only did he live to see his own empire, the Persian Empire, eradicated, he was a part of the army that fought against it. He was a part of the army that fought against the Sassanids and eventually destroyed the Sassanids. And then, and to me this is one of the most profound moments of the seerah, the entire, not the seerah, I mean the era of the Sahaba, I should say, because this happened after the death of the Sahaba. But to me, this incident more than anything represents the quick and drastic change that took place. That Salman not only radiallahu ta'ala and conquers Bilad al-Faris, Persia, he is then appointed the governor of Ctesiphon. In Arabic is called Madain, which was the capital of the Persian Empire. And he eventually passes away in that city of Ctesiphon. He passes away in Bilad al-Faris. So subhanAllah, look from where to where. Look how he began and look how he ended. And subhanAllah, the fact that this is a person who, we're not going to say he became the emperor because there is no emperor, but he is ruling from the palace. He stayed in the palace. Where was he living? He was living in the palace of the emperor. And the palace of the emperor was where Salat al-Jum'ah is taking place. He's giving the khutbah. And that palace is still around to this day. We're going to get there inshallah next Wednesday. This is a long halaqah, obviously it's not just one. So just imagine, somebody is growing up in a land and he knows this land is the pinnacle civilization. And lo and behold, before he dies, he becomes the ruler and the governor of that land. And he is ruling from the very bastion of power that he grew up seeing from afar but not ever seeing inside. He grew up hearing of but never actually being a part of. And now with Islam he comes in not only as a conqueror but essentially as a ruler. And as far as we know as well, he is the only Sahabi who was at one point in his life a Zoroastrian. As far as we know, from our limited knowledge of the seerah, no Sahabi in the time of the Prophet, obviously is a Sahabi in the time of the Prophet, no Sahabi was a Zoroastrian other than him. Obviously, after the Sassanid Empire is conquered, then the Zoroastrians convert en masse to Islam, and of course Iran then becomes a land of Islam, and the Zoroastrians eventually flee and leave, and they go to India, where they were called Farsis, and to this day their descendants are there. But the point is that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were no Iranians. Think about it. There is no Iranian in Arabia other than Salman Al-Farsi. So the only Sahabi who is of Persian blood, Persian ethnicity, speaking Farsi, and at one point in his life a Zoroastrian. Now obviously, technically, he did not convert to Islam from Zoroastrianism, as we all know, we're going to talk about today. He converted from Christianity, and there were a number of Sahaba who converted from Christianity, at least 5 or 6 that we know of that were Christian, including the most famous Adi ibn Hatim was a very famous Christian, including Addas. Remember Addas? Once upon a time we mentioned Addas. Addas is, who is Addas? Yes, the one in Ta'if who gave him the grapes, right? Addas was an Iraqi from the Banu Kalb tribe, and he converted as well. So there are a handful of Christian converts, not that many. Not that many. My guesstimate would be less than half a dozen that we know from amongst the Sahaba, meaning amongst the famous Sahaba. Obviously, we're not talking about the delegations and whatnot that came. And therefore, Salman Al-Farsi is one of those who converts as a Christian. Now, today, inshallah, we'll mention half of his story, and then we'll continue next Wednesday, and inshallah do some of his many hadith, because Salman Al-Farsi has quite a lot of hadith, and we'll do them, inshallah, next Wednesday. What do we know about Salman Al-Farsi pre-Islam? We only know what he himself told us, and alhamdulillah, he narrated his story in quite a lot of detail in the first person to none other than Abdullah ibn Abbas. So Abdullah ibn Abbas, being the curious young man that he is, he's absorbing all of this information. So Ibn Abbas then narrates this tradition from Salman Al-Farsi, and it is recorded in 5 or 6 pages of a hadith. It's not quite a hadith per se, because it's Salman speaking, but it has the Prophet in it, so therefore it becomes aspects of a hadith. And Salman Al-Farsi is narrating his story to Abdullah ibn Abbas. This hadith is found in Musnad Imam Ahmad. It's a very long hadith, and based on this hadith, basically all of the books about Salman are written, all of the narrations come about Salman Al-Farsi. So what do we know? And basically today's class I'll be going over that hadith and commenting on it. Salman Al-Farsi was born in a village called G, or some say J, but most likely it is G. And he says that it is close to the city of Rama Hormuz. And Rama Hormuz, it is still around today. To this day, it is a city in modern day Iran. And there's around 80,000 people in the last census of Rama Hormuz, a small little town. And it is in the Khuzestan province of Iran. Now in one narration, he says that he is from Isfahan. And this is problematic because Isfahan is pretty far from Rama Hormuz. So how do we reconcile this? We say that perhaps he is telling somebody Isfahan means like the capital or like some large city that is known to this person, because Rama Hormuz nobody knows. So he mentions like New York or something, even though he's not from New York, because it's like at least 100 miles away. So it's not that far, but at the same time it's not in the vicinity. Allah knows best how we reconcile. But he, in the first person, he says that he is from the village of G, which is outside of the town of Rama Hormuz. And he mentions that my father was a dehqan. Dehqan is a Persian word that means landlord. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, it's still in languages of Punjabi and whatnot. Dehqan, Pashto, it's still around, right? So this goes back to ancient Persia, dehqan, and it means landlord, right? To this day it means landlord. So this term dehqan is very common in the books of history, Islamic history. It was a title, and it essentially is a serf lord. Okay, it's a person who owns lots of land, and he then negotiates with the people to farm, and he'll get quite a lot, and they'll get a percentage. So he gets rich, and the people work the land and whatnot. So his father was a rich man, a dehqan, from outside of this village of G, or in the village of G. And he says that my father loved me more than anything else, so much so that he would keep me in the house like little girls are kept. Means don't go outside and be a young man, just be inside like little girls are kept. So nothing else to do, I continued excelling in worshipping in the Zoroastrian religion. There were Zoroastrians, and until I became the keeper of the fire that is always kept alight, and I made sure it never went out. So his father, being a rich man, and because he's not engaging in trade, he's not becoming a serviceman, he's not doing anything. So what else is he going to do? He just goes to the temple, keeps on going to the temple, until finally in the temple they make him a very prestigious person, and that is the one who is in charge of the fire. Now this isn't quite a priest. He has not gone to the training school of the priests, but it is a priestly role. It is a category that is very, very noble. And of course, in the Zoroastrian religion, you should all know, The Parsis are the only major religion in the world. The Parsis is what Indians call Zoroastrians, and they're the only remnants of Zoroastrians. In our times, really, there are no more Zoroastrians in Iran anymore. Pause here, footnote, there's a few left. But pretty much, if you meet a Zoroastrian, 99.9% of the time will be from India. Okay, and the Indians call them Parsis because they're coming from Persia, Faris, Parsi, and so they're called Parsis. To this day, they're called Parsis. So the Zoroastrian religion is one of the oldest religions of the world, and it goes back to Zarathustra, Zoroaster, and Zarathustra. It's very difficult to see what his real theology, aqidah was. Allah knows best. Was he an actual prophet of Allah? Or was he just a philosopher like Buddha or whatnot? Allah knows best. It's difficult to say. But their belief is that there are two primary gods, and they are the only religion in the world that believes in two gods. They're the only religion. Every other religion really believes in one major God. Even Hindus philosophically believe in one God, ultimate God. The only religion that really believes that there are two actual all-powerful gods is Zoroastrianism. And this makes it very atypical. And Allah knows best. Because of this, my own inclination, it seems bizarre to think that Zarathustra would have been a prophet. That's a bit too much of a deviation to go from one God to two all-powerful gods. And of course, they believe in the God of good, Ahura Mazda, and the God of evil, Ahriman. And this world is a battle place between Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. And judgment will come when finally Ahura Mazda conquers over Ahriman, when the God of good conquers over the God of evil. And for them, the God of good is represented by light. Light is not the God of good. The God of good is represented by light and fire. And the God of evil is represented by darkness and whatnot. It is representation, obviously, not an actual. And so when we say they worship the fire, technically this is incorrect, and a Zoroastrian would be insulted by this. They do not worship from their perspective the fire. They view it as being an embodiment of, or a representation of God. And the fire for them is a sacred element, even in the house. Even in the house, when you light a match, it is something that is a ritual or something that is a holy thing, meaning that it is something that is considered sacred. But they have a special type of fire which is used in their temples. And that fire, according to them, it goes back to the beginning of time. The fire that is found in the temples, it is a fire that has been lit from the beginning of time. And so every time they open up a new temple, they will light the fire of the temple from another temple. You cannot just take a match and go like this, okay? They will light the fire of the temple from another temple. So believe it or not, I met a Zoroastrian convert to Islam, and I asked her about this issue. I was like, how did you guys get the temple in America? So they had to commission a special plane to get a fire from a temple and bring it over here unextinguished, right? And they will keep it so that it is now then going to then be used to light a fire here. And then once the fire is anywhere here, then the other temples can be used from that fire. You understand, right? So that's the point of the fire being sacred. So Salman Al-Farsi's job is to keep the eternal flame going. It's a very big job, okay? He is in charge of that flame, the one that they think is going back all the way. So, and to this day, their temples have a permanent fire in them. To this day, that's the whole point. There's always going to be a type of fire that is going to be, I don't know the technicalities of it, but that is their theology. So, Salman Al-Farsi is in charge of this. One day, he says, my father became busy in some type of project or construction in the house, and he said to me, son, you see that I'm preoccupied, so I need you to go to such and such a land to bring the rent back, okay? Generally, Salman never did this. He was kept in the house because his father loved him so much. You can tell that he was one of those overprotective fathers, right? You can tell very, very concerned and very rich. He doesn't need his son to do it. But in this case, he goes, look, I'm really busy in this project. And obviously, when it comes to large sums of money, you can't just send an employee. You need to send flesh and blood. So he says to his son Salman that, well, obviously, we don't know his real name. That's another thing. Salman is his acquired name. One can assume that his original name was something like Salman. because when they would take their name, Salman was his name pre-Islam. Okay, pre-Islam means in Arabia. So the Arabs could call him Salman. So one can assume, and there are theories, and there's no point going down that there are a number of names given what might be a Persian equivalent to Salman, but the point is that Salman is his pre-Islamic Arab name, but not his Persian name. Clear? So the pre-Islamic Arab name is Arabicized from the Persian. So his father says to him, Salman, whatever his name was, go and collect the rent from that area, from that province, and do not be delayed. Get back before sunset, or else your delay will cause even more issues for me, for you are more beloved to me than all the property or land that I have. So he's very concerned about Salman. He wants to protect him. So Salman then goes to this other land, and he said, I happened to pass by a church, and I heard their singing. And the singing means the hymns. We all know how they sound. We all know they have a very unique way of doing their chants. Think of the Roman Catholic hymns, right? Because that's going back, that's going back all the way to that time. And they have a way of worshiping that is in its own way very eccentric and very, it does have its own sonorous element to that singing. So I heard their hymns, and I entered to the church to see what they're doing, and he ends up spending the whole day in the church. And he said, I didn't go to my father's land. I didn't go collect the rent. So much so my father sent out search parties to hunt for me. But he is now in the church. We can imagine, he doesn't say it, we can imagine he's engaging in dialogue, asking questions, absorbing all that they're doing. And he then decides to convert because he says that I felt that their way of worshiping was better than ours. Their ta'abbud means not just way of worship, but overall their religion and religiosity was better than ours. Okay, so he senses a truth in Christianity, and there is no question that Christianity is much closer to the concept of God, Akhirah, Risala than Zoroastrians from our perspective. Even modern day Christianity, how about Christianity 1,500 years ago when Salman is talking, right? So the Christianity of Salman's time is really the closest ones will get to Islam. So he appreciated it and he decided to convert. So he said to the Christians, where can I find the asl of this deen? Where is the asl of this deen? They told me, Biladu Sham. Biladu Sham. Now notice here, at this stage we can assume he is a teenager, okay, because the story is just beginning. Maybe, and his father would not have sent him to collect rent unless the bare minimum is 15. Like 15 would be our 18, 19. Okay, the bare minimum is 15, 16 years old. So he's now going to do this chore for his father. So at this stage, at the age of 15, 16, he's not happy simply saying, okay, let me become a Christian. He is saying, where do I go to study the asl of this deen? Like Salman is really, and this is throughout the entire story, he is a seeker of truth. He is somebody who's searching for much more than just a superficial understanding. I mean, can you imagine, not only is it a new faith, not only he spends the whole day quizzing, interrogating, absorbing, then deciding to convert. At that stage, he says, tell me, where do I find the source and the origin? What is the asl of this deen that I can go study? So they told him, Bilad al-Sham, Syria, which means Jerusalem and Damascus, all those lands. Go, that's where our origin is. That's where the asl is. So when I returned home, my father rebuked me, Ya Bunay, where have you gone? Where were you? You were delayed. I told you to come back immediately. And he told his father, and this is the naivety of a teenager, thinking that his father is going to side with him no matter what he does. So he tells his father that I passed by a church, and I was entranced with their religion, and I felt that their religion is better than our religion, so I want to enter their religion. What's going to happen? Will you abandon our faith and the faith of our forefathers? Surely our faith is better than theirs. And a back and forth, Salman glosses over it. Again, we can imagine, shouting, yelling match, whatnot, until finally when his father realizes he's going to convert, then he said, my father became scared for me, and he tied me up and put an iron chain on my legs, tied me and made me a prisoner in the house, that you're not going to go back to the church. Now, let's pause here for a second. The year we don't know exactly. However, probably one can say around the time of the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, or when the Prophet ﷺ is a young man. Okay? One of the things about Salman, we don't know his age. And lots of legends exist. Some say that he lived for 120 years. Some say 150. One even says 300 years. And Imam al-Dhahabi says, I doubt all of this. Most likely he died max 70, 75. And this is the fact that mythologies develop. And people make a small thing and make it much larger. And Salman takes on a mythical status. And subhanAllah, we don't have any indications that he was somebody who was supernaturally long in living. He seems to be an old man. So by the time the Prophet ﷺ comes to Medina, he's maybe a little bit age-wise older, or maybe around the age. We don't know exactly, For sure he's not a young man. But at the time the Prophet ﷺ came, he is still working in the date palms. Right? Which indicates that he has physical strength to work as a manual laborer, as we're going to see. So maybe 60 years old at that time. So therefore, he is born roughly 550, let's say, earliest, to 560, which is roughly when, the Prophet ﷺ is born. So around this point in time, that we can assume that he is born. So what is happening in Persia about Christianity? Very interesting point. This is not mentioned in the books of Seerah because, again, they're not looking at it the way that we or the Westerns would look at it. From our perspective, what intrigues me, what type of Christianity is Salman exposed to? In the 6th century CE, what Christianity exists in Persia? And a little bit of research indicates that in Persia, the only branch of Christianity that was flourishing was the branch that had been exiled by the mainstream Byzantine, Roman, the church which became Catholicism. Okay, call it Neo-Catholicism or Proto-Catholicism. Basically, not Neo, it's Proto. It's the original Catholicism, and that version of Christianity is called Nestorian Christianity. Okay, Nestorians. And the Nestorians, by the way, believe it or not, they're still around. These days, they're Iraqi Nestorians, okay? Because Iraq was Iran back then, right? Back then, the province of Iraq was within Iran. And Nestorian Christianity is the earliest sect of Christianity that is still alive to this day. The earliest sect. No sect that still exists goes back before Nestorian Christianity. And they were formed 450 CE. That is 1,600 years ago. That's when Nestorianism is formed. You can't compare it with this Protestant Christianity, which is 200, 500 years old. Or even Catholic Christianity, which split from Orthodox 12th century, 10th century CE. Right? So this Christianity is the earliest version of Christianity that is still around. And they have a very unique belief, which is considered to be heretical by all other sects of Christianity. They believe that Jesus Christ has two distinct natures, fully human and fully divine. So Jesus is fully human, according to the Nestorians. And he is eventually fully divine. And many amongst them believed in something that was called adoptionism. Adoptionism is a Christian term that means that Jesus was normal, fully human. Then God adopted him to be his son. You can see that this version of Christianity is definitely not anything like mainstream Christianity in our times. You can see why. Jesus is a regular human, born human, everything human. At some point in time, according to, and again, obviously, just like every firqa, they have schisms within them. So the main point of Nestorian Christianity to this day is that Jesus has two natures. He is fully human. He has a human aspect. And distinct, he's also divine. The way that modern Christians say he is fully human and divine simultaneously. He has one nature, one will, everything is one. They're saying two. And when you say two, you're saying there's an element that is fully human. He's a normal human being. Okay? And as you should all know, by now, you should all know this fact. The whole issue of early Christianity is defining Jesus and Jesus' relationship with God. How much human, how much God, what percentage, how much will, this and that, the relationship, all of the schisms form, monophysized, diphysized, the whole thing. So Nestorians, they're definitely not Muslims. They're definitely not muwahidun. But one firqa amongst them has a very interesting theology that, it's not Islamic, but it's definitely not Christian the way Christians understand it from our perspective. Jesus is human, and he's not biologically the Son of God. God at some point adopts him. That's called adoptionism. And when he adopts him, then he becomes the Son of God, essentially metaphorically. Now obviously this view is way better from our perspective than the Trinitarian view that is now common. So it's not a coincidence, what I'm trying to say is, it's not a coincidence that Salman found people that had views that were very close to Islam, and they're protecting this thing, and they're going to get to Islam. So Nestorius was a priest who died 450, and he was declared a heretic. And you should all know that early Christianity is marked by a series of councils, the Council of Nicaea, the Council of this and that, and one of the most earliest councils, the Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE. And in this council, they declared Nestorianism to be a heresy. What does that mean politically? If you are a Nestorian, you must convert or die in the Roman lands, in the Byzantine lands. So what did the followers of Nestorius do? They fled. Where did they go? Iran, Persia. So they came to Persia a century before Salman, and in Persia, in Iran, they were allowed their faith because the Sassanids viewed them as being advantageous. Why? Why? They are enemies of the church. They're enemies of the church. So in those days, religious bigotry was the norm. If you were not a part of the faith tradition of the land, you weren't allowed to live there. So generally speaking, they wouldn't allow non-religious, not people of other religions to come. In this case, the Sassanids welcomed them, and they allowed them to have their churches and worship, as long as they're not, preaching on another. But why? Because they represent a threat to the church, right? The mainstream church of Rome, of Byzantine Empire. This is a firqa that considers them to be heretic. So good, let's house them. Let's let them come here, let them flourish here, because there's no threat to us. We don't feel scared by them, and we can use them against their own people later on. Okay? Now obviously, what's going to happen in 100 years, forget your own people, you become Iranian in blood and marriage and looks and what. This is what happens. This is the reality of intermingling and whatnot. So this is when Salman Al-Farsi is now coming to the picture, and it is very clear when you hear the story of Salman that this group of Nestorians, their teachers, their connections, their knowledge, even their gospels and their books is totally separate from the other churches. And again, us Muslims, many of us are very, very unaware of Christian history. And not that I'm an expert in it, far from it, I'm not an expert. But one of the things we should all know is that again, in these early years, all the groups are writing their own gospels. All the groups have their own holy books. There is no one Quran of the Christians. There's the gospel according to this, according to that, according to this. Well, at one point in time, there are hundreds of according tos, right? And it was only by essentially, church decree and whatnot that the 4 were chosen. Those 4 were chosen based upon, do they conform to our theologies, not the other way around, right? They were chosen based upon, this is our belief, the Nicene Creed, which of the gospels conforms to our creed? And the others will be destroyed. That's the way they decided. It's not the other way around. So others were destroyed. Point is, one can imagine the Nestorian churches have preserved statements of Isa. This we know for a fact because of what we're going to read. And they have preserved gospels that are unknown to their Western counterparts. And this is Allah's qadr that Salman now gets access to this group of people. Okay, so back to our story here. So Salman is chained up. So he sends them a message, which means that, like any rich person, he has his employees, he has his servants, he has his people that love him and will do things for him as a favor. He sends a message to the church, telling them what happens, and he says, when there is a caravan that's going to Syria, tell me. Which means I want to leave my parents' house, I want to go to Syria. When they arrived, he gets the message, so he says, tell me right before they depart. So right before they depart, he hears of their departure and he gets rid of the chains and shackles, which again indicates that he was there just to please his father. He doesn't have another plan. He cannot run anywhere. He is a Persian. Where is he going to go? He can't go anywhere unless he leaves Persia. So he gets rid of the chain and shackles and he joins the Syrian caravan to go back to Bilad al-Sham. Now where did he go in Sham? We do not know. We can assume Jerusalem. We can assume. If not Jerusalem, Damascus. These were the two major cities of Sham. These were the two bastions of Christianity at the time that he might have found what he wanted to. But we don't know. He doesn't give us the city's name. So he said, when I arrived, I asked for the greatest scholar that they had. So they informed me of the patriarch of the land. So now, subhanAllah, from Persia, he now gets to, if not the most, but one of the most powerful and influential Christians alive at that time. Okay? And so he goes to the patriarch. So now you can imagine the patriarch of the city. You can imagine a person of great power and influence, and informs him of his story. So the patriarch allowed me to live in the monastery. In those days, if you dedicated your life to the church, basically the church would then take care of your food and drink, and you could live, and you become a monk. You become a hermit, basically, or a monk. You become a priest. So they would take care of you, and in return you would basically service them. So he allowed me to basically enter the church. Now this allowance, this entry, essentially gave him entry to any other church after that. Because once you're dedicated to the life of service, right, so you can then go from any church. And this is what Allah's qadr was, that one of the most powerful people alive gave him that status that he needed. It's the acceptance into church service. Because once you're in that track, then essentially you can transfer to any church, which is what he's going to do. And it was Allah's qadr, and Allah works in ways that we'll never understand. That this powerful man, he needed the powerful man to get him in, but Salman Al-Farsi said this man proved to be an evil man. This man proved to be an evil man. He would order the people to give charity, and then he would hide it and eat it himself. He would steal the people's wealth. And he had amassed 7 chests of gold and silver. And he was an evil man. Whatever else evil one can imagine. You know, typical as we can imagine. Okay? And subhanAllah, it's Allah's qadr that this evil man was needed because he was the most powerful person, and Salman needed to get into the system. And that person had the power to do it, even if he wasn't good overall. And when he died, they came to bury him, and Salman said, do you know the reality of this man? They said, what? He said that he would ask you to give charity, and yet he would keep it himself. They said, do you have any proof of this? He said, I will show you where all the money is kept. Now, if you're a man of the church, to this day, by the way, to this day, everything you earn, you give to the church. If you have dedicated your life as a priest to the Catholic or whatnot, or to any of the orders, the Benedictine order, any order that you have, the Jesuits, any order, you have to give everything you earn to the church, and then the church you will have to justify. This is my rent. This is so then you get back whatever you need to live. And I know this because my own advisor was a Jesuit minister or whatnot at Yale, and he actually told me this, that every paycheck that he got, it goes there. Then what he needs, he comes back. And he has to write every expense of his, that his own money that he earned, it goes there, then it comes back what is needed. The rest all goes to the church, okay? So, no church person can amass a wealth, right? This is in the classical system. These days, some of the richest people in America are pastors and televangelists, right? They have their, mashallah, private jets and planes, mashallah, tabarakallah, and they think that that is their service. So, point being that he showed them the gold, 7 chests of gold and silver. And it's clear that this is a man who would tell them to give to the poor, and he would then take their wealth and eat it himself. And so they became so enraged, they said, we will never bury his body. And they put him on a cross as a dead man, and they stoned him as a dead man. Okay? And subhanAllah, this was his first priest. And this was the largest church of the city that he was in. And it also shows us, and we seek Allah's refuge, every single religion has its hypocrites and sinners in their ranks of their clergy. We ask Allah for refuge and salam and ask Allah for ikhlas. But this is the reality, and it also shows us no one likes a hypocrite. No one likes a hypocrite. Wal-iyadu billah. So when they discovered the reality of this man, they then made a better job of choosing his successor. And this was all Allah's qadr, right? So Salman Al-Farsi said, they then chose somebody, I swear I have never seen anyone who doesn't pray 5 times more righteous than him. Meaning, no Muslim, apart from Muslims, no non-Muslim I have met was ever righteous than him. That's what he's trying to say. Okay? Leave aside the Muslims. Anybody in my life before meeting the righteous Muslims, I have never met somebody more righteous than him. And وَلَا نُزَكِّي عَلَيْهِ أَحَدًا, but if you look at some other faith traditions and who they chose to be their leader without mentioning specific names, but scandals are taking place in their version of their teachings, and they are desperate for legitimacy, so they choose somebody that seems to be far better than his predecessors, and we judge by outer appearance, right? This is the reality, that when the corruption becomes so bad and rock bottom, they need to salvage genuine, bona fide religiosity. And this shows us sincerity shines through even amongst millas of kufr. You can be sincere as a kafir, guys. You can be sincere as a kafir. And that sincerity, because it is sincere, it shines through. So when this guy turned out to be so corrupt, they did a really good job, and they got somebody whom even Salman says, in my whole life before coming to Islam, I've never met somebody better than him. And he was not greedy of this world at all. And he desired the akhirah. And he was more upright than anybody I have met. All day, all night, he was mustaqim. He was a person straight in his character. And this is true. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran that there are those of the Ahli Kitab that have that characteristic, that they have khashya, they have, and this is before the coming of Islam. So we hope good for his teacher at this point in time. He seems to be a genuine, good, believing person. And again, it shows us that true religiosity, it brings out this love in people. Look how much Salman said that. In fact, he said that I have never loved anyone at that time in my life more than him. Like obviously before meeting the Prophet ﷺ, I have never loved anyone more than I loved him. So this shows as well that real religiosity, it shines and it brings people's hearts. When his death came, or on his deathbed, I went to him and I said, you know my situation, and you know how I came here, and now by the qadr of Allah you are leaving this world, so what do you advise that I do? So the man said, Ya Bunay, I don't know anybody in this city that is upon what I am upon, other than one friend of mine in Mosul, in Iraq, in Mosul. And the people have changed, and the people have altered, and the people have destroyed, so go to that man. So it's very clear what this priest is saying, and this priest, wherever he came from, he is being brought to Jerusalem as a very high position, and in this holy city, he is saying, the people have changed religion, and the people have altered the religion of Jesus, and the people have destroyed. So there are Christians at this time, they see what's going on with the councils, they see the destruction of the books, they see the turning away, and they are fully aware. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jal says, they change the kalima and they know it, right? يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. They know it. Allah says in the Quran. These days, one can say the Christians don't know, they don't understand. When it is happening, the righteous Christians see it. And so Salman's teacher is one of them. And this also shows us as well, and we're going to see this again throughout all of his teachers, that his version of Christianity, meaning the teacher's version, even though Nestorianism was a sect, within Nestorianism, whatever this teacher is upon, a smaller sect, it's almost gone. So he's saying, in this land, there's people are gone. Go to somewhere else. Go to Mosul. And so he then went to Mosul. And he went to the church there, the man that was supposed to be there. And I stayed there as long as Allah allowed me to stay. Same question, when I was about to die, I asked him the question, where should I go? So he said, my son, I do not know of anybody following our understanding, me and my sahib, other than a man in Nasibin. And Nasibin is the English, we say Nisibis. So go to him. So I went to him, told my story. So now we have the initial church guy, then we have the righteous man, then we have the Mosul, now we have Nisibin. We're already on number 4 now. Okay? So realize in these days, as I said, once you're in the track to go to another monastery, at least your food and drink is provided. So he doesn't have to worry about money. And that's the qadr of Allah, that he met the corrupt patriarch. Because he got in when it wouldn't have been the easiest thing to get in. The corrupt guy, despite his corruption, was powerful. So he wrote him the letter to get him in. Once he's in, khalas, now he's a priest or he's a monk or whatever his track is, and now he can go to all of these monasteries and transfer within the system. So where does he go? It is called Nisibis. And Nisibis is in modern Turkey, close to the Syrian border. And Nisibis actually has a very, very rich heritage. And I did my research about this city as well. And it seems as if Nisibis was a bastion of early Christianity, and one of the earliest churches of the world is still found there to this day. One of the most ancient churches. It is called the Church of Saint Jacob. And this Saint Jacob lived 200 years before Salman. He is one of the signatories of the Council of Nicaea. So this guy is one of the big guys, Saint Jacob. And he then dies in Nisibis, and his church then became the most famous church of that region. You can imagine he's one of the signatories of the Council of Nicaea, and it became a place of learning as well. So there would be priests who would teach, and some say it is one of the first Christian seminaries in the world. This is during the time of Salman Al-Farsi. So I put 1 plus 1 together. This is not found in other books. This is my ijtihad, I could be wrong. I put 1 plus 1 together. In the year 500 to 600, Nisibis was a bastion of Christian theology, and this church of Saint Jacob was where lots of priests would come and teach other Christians. And I find it very reasonable to believe that the man mentioned would have been one of these people. There goes, there's a man in Mosul, in Nisibis, who is upon this theology, go to him. So Allah knows best. It might even be the Church of Saint Jacob, and unbelievably, the Church of Saint Jacob is still, at least 2-3 rooms of it are standing to this day, because it was built in the glory period, and very magnificent structure. And so subhanallah, if what I'm saying is possibly correct, maybe even the very rooms and chambers that Salman Al-Farsi lived in could still be standing to this day. There are pictures, you can go online, the Church of Saint Jacob in Nisibis, Turkey. And this church is visited by Christian pilgrims because it is one of the oldest churches in the world that is still standing. It goes back to 400 CE. So think about that. Okay, 400 CE it goes back. So when Salman is visiting it, right, this is the biggest church of Nisibis without a doubt. It is the most famous church of Nisibis, and it is the church where there's lots of famous intellectuals and thinkers. It makes sense that the person that is being mentioned, because these people are atypical. These people are not sheep. These people are thinkers. The people that Salman is meeting, they're rising above the flock. And typically speaking, those people, they are the profound thinkers, the intellectuals. They're not just going with the flow. So Allah knows best. This is my theory. It could be that he is at this church of Saint Jacob. And therefore he goes to Nisibis, And the same story, he goes there for a few years. This is his fourth guy now. When he's about to die, Salman tells him, you know my story. The person I was assigned to sent me to so-and-so. He sent me to so-and-so. Now he sent me to you. Now you're at your deathbed. Where should I go? So the priest says, I swear to you, I don't know of anybody of our group left except somebody in Ammuriya, number 5 now. Okay? Ammuriya. Ammuriya is in English Amorium. So go to Ammuriya, go to Amorium. And Amorium, again, I looked up as much as we can. Not much that we know about this city. But one point before we get to the city, one point. There must be, at this point in time, there must be a few hundred, at least maybe 100 million Christians or something, if not more, at this point in time. And of them, the vast majority are proto-Catholic, Roman Catholic, okay? And the fact that Salman is meeting not only, the remnants of the Nestorians, but then within that sect, he's meeting people that are essentially on a theology that is absolutely unique. Literally, each one is saying, I only know one guy that we're still believing in. Until finally, he gets to the one guy that will lead him to the Prophet ﷺ. The question that I ask you is, how on earth did he end up with those 5 people that are on that theology? And what this shows us, when you are sincere, Allah will guide you. When you want hidayah, then 1 billion people might be wrong, you'll find the one person who's right. This is the blessings of sincerity and ikhlas and tawakkul. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever puts his trust in Allah, Allah will find a way out for him and provide for him from places he never expected. And so he goes now to Amorium, and Amorium, it was a famous town in the Byzantine times. It was built in the early Hellenistic period. What I looked up about it, the famous Aesop or Aesop's fables, Aesop's fable. Aesop was from this town of Amorium, the famous Hellenistic philosopher. And Amorium was a fortress town that protected Constantinople. So Constantinople was surrounded by towns all around it, many distances away, and Amorium was a very heavily guarded fortress. To this day, the fortress is still there, but the city has long been abandoned. When Muawiyah, the Khalifa, first attacked the Byzantine Empire, remember we talked about this, we talked about the early Umayyads. When Muawiyah first attacked the Byzantine Empire, he attacked Amorium. And he was not successful, so he couldn't get to Constantinople. Because again, he didn't conquer Constantinople, but he attacked it. So he got to Amorium, and he attacked Amorium. So that shows you again so Amorium is basically up north between the Arab lands and Constantinople. Now, why did Salman end up there? Because he has to get down to Arabia. So Allah Azza wa Jal is sending him to an outpost, another land, in the middle of nowhere, but it's close to the Arab Peninsula. It's all Allah's qadr. It's all Allah's qadr. So now Salman ends up in Amorium, and his 6th teacher is there. And here he lives for a while. So we can assume now he's 40, 50 years old at the bare minimum. And he says that now I actually acquired wealth. So now he's living a good life. He acquired wealth, he owns cows and sheep, and basically he became a man of some property. And now once again his 6th teacher is about to pass away, and so he asks the same question. Now at this time you need to ask yourself, why is he asking the same question over and over again? I mean, he must have graduated from the school of Christianity, right? He must have finished like whatever studies he needed to do, right? Because what was the first, when he was 15, he's like, where is the asl? I want to go study. Okay, he's gotten his bachelor's, master's, 3 PhDs now. How much is he going to study? But see, this shows us who Salman is. Salman is a seeker, and a seeker always wants more knowledge. He's never satisfied. At this stage, there is no question Salman could have had his own patriarchy. He could have opened up his own shop. He could have just gone independent. He has earned that right because he's been in the service of senior figures across. But he's not interested in the power. He wants knowledge. At this stage, he still hasn't heard of a prophet coming. So he's not searching for a prophet. So then why is he going from teacher to teacher to teacher? Because a truly humble man does not want the limelight. A truly humble man wants to always benefit from those more knowledgeable than him. A person who wants to learn will always want a teacher. And a person who wants to be in the spiritual ambience will find a spiritual guide. So this also shows us again the importance of being in the company of righteous, the importance of studying with the people of knowledge. Now his sixth teacher finally opens up the door to the promised land of the prophecy. What does the sixth teacher say? He says, Ya Bunay, my dear son, no one is left, as far as I know, doing what we used to do. Our understanding is gone from the face of the earth. Ala wajh al-ard. Pause here. This shows us how various sects of Christianity disappeared, one after the other. Okay? People knew that this is a very small understanding. They might know one or two or three people that have a similar understanding, and then that's it, it's gone. Early Christianity saw hundreds of different firqas, and they were not supported by the dynasty, by Rome. Catholicism is the official Roman Christianity. Understand this, right? Catholic Christianity was called the kingly Christians, right? Al-Mulukiyya, Nasara al-Mulukiyya it was called, right? Literally the kingly Christians. Why? Why did Catholicism become dominant? Because the office of the emperor supported it. Constantine supported it. The other versions of Christianity, they're going to dwindle away, and that's why to this day, Nestorian Christianity is hardly anything. I think maybe less than 50,000 are left, right? Coptic Christianity survived because it was in Egypt, and then the Muslims came and protected the Copts. If the Muslims had not come, even Coptic Christianity would be gone. The Muslims came, and because of that, Coptic Christianity is still around in Egypt, which is another early non-Catholic version of Christianity. Other than that, the Coptics, the Nestorians, and then you have the Maronites, the three versions of Christianity. Other than that, all of them, and all three were in Arab Muslim lands, by the way. It's not a coincidence. All three were in Arab Muslim lands because the Muslims really didn't care which version of Christianity you followed. And ironically, it was Muslims who protected these rather extreme understandings, or actually not extreme, but atypical understandings of Christianity. So the sixth guy, what does the sixth guy tell him? He says to him, I don't know anybody in the whole world that is still following our understanding, but you are now close to the time of the Prophet who will be sent with the religion of Ibrahim. So we know that in this version of Christianity, there is mention of a prophet who's linked primarily with Ibrahim, which is interesting because Isa alayhi salam is talking about a prophet that is Abrahamic and not a prophet that is Bani Ishaq, Bani Yaqub, Bani Israel, right? So Isa must be telling some of his followers about a prophet that is Abrahamic, and this means Bani Ishaq, Bani Israel, because they wouldn't mention Ibrahim unless it was of that nature. So he says, this man says, he shall emerge from a land he emigrated to. It's not his motherland. It's not the land that gave birth to him. He left his land, he emigrated to a land, and he shall be based in a land that is not his. Okay, so this is one of his signs. One of his signs is that he is preaching Ibrahim's message. One of his signs, his land will not be the land that he was born in. He has migrated to it. And he will be based in that land. And what is the description of that land? It is a land of dates and date palms. Ardu nakhla. Lots of date palms in between two plains of volcanic rocks. Now this is, we all know the city of Medina. And there is no doubt, and this is in a hadith in Muslim Imam Ahmad, there is no doubt, therefore, in our minds as Muslims, that Isa ibn Maryam is telling these signs to some of his disciples. He's predicting, right? As Allah says in the Quran, وَمُبَشِّرًا بِرَسُولٍ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِي اسْمُهُ أَحْمَدٍ. This is in the Quran. There's going to be a prophet, his name is going to be Ahmad. So there are signs that Isa left with his followers. And these are some of those signs. Then the monk says to Salman, and the clear-cut ayah that you should recognize him by. These are isharat. There's ayat that you will recognize him by are three. Number one, he will not accept sadaqah. Number two, he will accept hadiyah. And number three, there is khatamun nubuwah on his back. These are the three ayat that you must test him with. Number one, لا يأكل الصدقة. But number two, يأكل الهدية. And number three, there's going to be the khatamun nubuwah. When you see the khatamun nubuwah, you will recognize it. He didn't describe it. Okay, he did not describe it. Now, these signs are reported from other people as well in the seerah. And that's why we are certain that Isa sallallahu alayhi salam told some of his followers. So when we did the seerah, we mentioned the emissary from Heraclius that came and visited him in Tabuk. And that emissary's name was, who? Hudhayfa, just take Hudhayfa. The emissary's name was not known, but he was known as the one from Tanukh, At-Tanukhi. Okay, At-Tanukhi. Yes, our note taker is taking good notes, mashallah, tabarakallah. But Google isn't working today apparently on his notes. The one from Tanukh, At-Tanukhi. Okay, the one from At-Tanukh. Do you remember his story, guys? At-Tanukhi. Heraclius sent him with signs, and one of those signs was seal. Now, here is the point. Salman has never met Heraclius. Salman is not living in Constantinople. He's not living in the Roman lands. Salman has a whole different track of Christianity. Yet still, Salman is being told by somebody, right, in some small city in the middle of nowhere, this is one of his signs. And we learn from the hadith that Heraclius contacted one of the most learned clergy of Constantinople, Istanbul at that time, to get the signs of prophethood. And that man gave some signs. One of them was the seal. So without a doubt, therefore, there is some connection. Whether it's the same person or the same tree, right? Or maybe even some knowledge that was kept secret except to some groups of people, and it was then lost over time. But there's no denying that this knowledge was mentioned by Jesus Christ himself, Isa ibn Maryam. So this man dies, and Salman is now left without a sheikh, without a teacher, and Salman wants to get now to a land. He has no idea where it is. He has no idea which land even it is in. But see, here is Allah's qadr. Allah Azza wa Jal has willed that he now ends up in this Amuriya city, right? Which doesn't even, it's a small little camp. I mean, literally off the map. All of this is Allah's qadr. What is Amuriya? It is the first stopping station for the Arabs. Subhanallah. Wallahi, look at Allah's qadr, from where to where to where to where. Now, he doesn't know where to go. So, in this fortress city, a Arab Christian tribe called the Banu Kalb, and yes, Kalb like the Kalb, right? They were called the Kalb because in those days, pre-Islamic days, the Kalb was considered to be like a fierce fighter, right? So some tribes viewed the Kalb in a positive way, and so they would call somebody Kalb. So the founder of the Kalb tribe was called Kalb. By the way, all of his brothers were also named after animals, mashallah, tabarakallah. So one of them is a wolf, one of them is an eagle. So you have like all of the Kalb's brothers. Yeah, he called, the guy called all of his sons animals. That doesn't sound very good, but he called all of his sons animals. So one of them was called Kalb. And then that Kalb founded the Banu Kalb tribe. Okay, and the Banu Kalb is a Qahtani tribe. From the Banu Kalb, by the way, from the Banu Kalb is the famous Sahabi. All of you know his name, but none of you is registering now. Who is from the famous tribe of Kalb, guys? The famous tribe of Kalb, huh? Who? Exactly, who is he? Which one? You know him. Huh? The what? Very good, mashallah, mashallah. And I wonder why you remember him. Is there a connection you feel with him? It's like the one that Jibril used to resemble. Dihya al-Kalbi. There's the Kalb right there. Dihya al-Kalbi. Right? By the way, Zayd ibn Haritha was also from the Kalb tribe, the adopted son, so the Zayd ibn Haritha. So the Banu Kalb come by, and Salman is asking every tribe where they're from, descriptions. The Banu Kalb described a land, most likely it's in the Tabuk region, most likely, because that's where they were, up there. And they said lots of dates and whatnot. There are no dates in Amuriya. Okay, so the first tribe that mentions dates, Salman's bells start ringing. And he says, look, this is all that I have. The goats, the cows, the sheep, this is all that I have. I'll sell them to you if you take me to your land. SubhanAllah, this was Allah's qadr to get him to this little nondescript village. Okay, so the Banu Kalb took all of that property, and he said, as soon as we got to Wadi al-Qura, which is in Jordan or right under Arab land, as soon as we got to Wadi al-Qura, they tied me up, they deceived me, backstabbed me, and they sold me as a slave. And this was the standard issue, the dangers of that era. There is no civilization. That's what you understand. We have to understand the tribe. Your tribe is going to protect you. If that were to have happened to another person, then as soon as it reaches the tribe is going to attack. How dare you do that? That's the law of Jahiliyyah. There is no international law. There is no 911 government. That's the problem. Salman is a stranger. What's going to happen? So there's no safety and security. Now what we really notice here is, subhanAllah, one thing when I was reading this, there's a famous hadith in Sahih Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ said, how I wish I could see my brethren, my ikhwa. And the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, aren't we your brothers? And he said, no, you are my ashab, antum ashabi. You are not my brothers. My brothers are those who will come after me, and they would wish to sell all of their possessions just to see me. And Salman Al-Farsi quite literally sold everything he had on the desire to see the Prophet ﷺ, even though he had never heard about him yet. He doesn't even know who he is. Look at what level of love that Salman had for the stranger he has not even met yet. To willing to sell his whole life and then to literally become a slave. He became a slave, and as you know, he was then sold into slavery as to the Banu Qurayza. Somebody from the Banu Qurayza purchases him. Now another thing that we notice over here is that once again, no musibah is a musibah if you have tawakkul in Allah. No musibah is a musibah if you have true tawakkul in Allah. The worst disaster is really a blessing in disguise if you have iman. Yusuf being sold into slavery, he would not have become the minister had that not happened. Salman being sold into slavery, he would never have ended up to be one of the most famous Sahaba if this had not happened. No one is a loser if that person puts his iman and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Salman is sold into slavery, and as a direct result of that, as we know, he ends up in Medina. Because who did the Banu Kalb sell him to? The Banu Kalb sold him to basically somebody, actually he went to somebody from the Yahud, and then this Yahudi sold him to somebody from the Banu Qurayza. So it was actually double. Okay, so it wasn't one step even then. So after 6 teachers, now he becomes a slave to 2 people. He goes to one Yahudi who then sells him to another one of the Banu Qurayza. So now finally he ends up in Medina, and he says, as soon as I saw Medina, tayaqantu, I had yaqeen. This was the land that had been described to me. So before even the coming of the Prophet ﷺ, he knows Allah is watching out for him. And this is again what we expect from somebody with such strong iman. And he then comes to Medina happily, and he says that, and subhanAllah, what a beautiful narration here. He said that I became happy even though the condition I was in should not have been one of happiness. Do you understand what he's saying here? Yani wallahi, what iman. What iman. He's a slave. And he says, who would be happy being a slave? But he goes, looking at the land of Medina, I became happy, even though my situation was not one of happiness. This shows us the strength of his iman even before he had real iman. This is iman that is raw, that is coming from Allah's blessing without even having heard Islam. And so inshallah ta'ala, here on this melodramatic anticlimax, this Shahrazad moment here, mashallah tabarakallah, for those who got that one, we will pause over here and then inshallah resume bi'idhnillahi ta'ala next Wednesday, Salman's story from Medina. And we might even have to go 3 weeks, I don't know, because Salman has a lot of hadith and he's also very interesting hadith as well. We'll see inshallah. Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Inshallah.